Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Data Engineering Weekly. So, by this time, we take every interesting articles from Data Engineering Weekly published every week, and then we go in-depth discussion for each and every article that we kind of feel that is kind of very interesting to talk about. As usual, Ashwin with us. Hi, Ashwin. How are
Hey,
you?
hey Anand, I'm doing great. Hello everyone. Glad to be back with Data Engineering Weekly.
Okay. So, what are the articles we are talking about today? Do you have the list?
Yeah, I do. So, edition 129 is what we are going to be discussing today. We have chosen four out of the top blogs, anyways. All of that are available as part of Data Engineering Weekly, and we strongly encourage you to go ahead and read them. But we've picked a couple of them which are more relevant for from a discussion perspective, right? Generative AI, LLMs are the topic that's of discussion for the last 2 or 3 months right now. And we're going to start off with how DoorDash is thinking and have been editing around some of the areas that they're going to use generative AI. The second blog is very interesting for people who are in Europe, people who are wanting to go to Europe, around some salary benchmarks for data engineers. I think this is great. Like across data teams, data engineers, data analysts, etc., across different roles. We'll quickly highlight some of the salary benchmarks as well. Probably Anand, you may want to add perspective of US, and I can add some perspectives on the India market as well. Uh, I think there's not a week that goes without talking about contracts or setting the right to ensure the data quality or the trust of the data is improved. So the third block that we're going to be talking about is how Trivago team has implemented data validations with their expectations. So we'll quickly add our thought process and also add the author's thought process as we walk through that block. And finally, over the last couple of weeks, we've been stressing on event streams and real time architecture. So we'll finish off this week's podcast with that, how Expedia is implementing a real-time event-based architecture and how they have migrated from a complete relational based to a completely an event-based architecture. So these are four topics that we'll be speaking today.
Awesome. The list looks exciting. I'm very excited to talk about the salary part of it. Like everyone is kind of very curious about it.
Yeah.
Let's jump in and start with DoorDash. Identify five big areas for using generative AI. What is your thought, Ashwin, on all those use cases you see? I know every company now kind of struggling or stumbling upon to say like what is LLM means for them, what is generative AI to them, in terms of the product, in terms of how they wanted to integrate into the system, what are the use cases they can solve that. I think I really appreciate what DoorDash done it here. They kind of set an example saying that, hey, these are the use cases that we are considering to use generative AI. So what's your take on that, Ashwin?
I think very well documented article. I think more folks should document around what use cases they are trying to solve and how are they approaching this whole generative AI landscape or LLMs adoption within their landscape, because it just creates more use cases. I think they've listed five use cases as part of the block here, and all five of them are relevant, right? And to me, every step on how we automate things today improves productivity. All of them are basically improving employee productivity or user productivity to a larger extent. I think for a company at the scale of DoorDash, which is all about ensuring their users, their consumers are able to, our customers are able to consume and order products. I think so. Managing left and right integrations with suppliers and customers. So I think a lot of automation that can be brought through, right? So they're also a content company in a way, right? So they help people discover what they want. So definitely a lot of applications that has been discussed. We'll be talking quickly about each of these use cases.
Yeah, totally. I think for me, it's a very highlight is like the first one they talked about the customer task, right? Like for example, they're talking about assistance of customers to complete a task. If I log into the, I'm kind of occasional user of DoorDash. I prefer home food a lot,
Oh, okay.
but but I feel like the automatic feeling of for example, I like I have some ingredient preferences. So what they're saying about like based on my purchase behavior, they can build a cart for them for me automatically. And they can also build a knowledge graph about like who are my family members, what is their preference going to be look like. So it's kind of a personalized suggestion for me. If I go to like if I'm wanted to try a new restaurant, I just click and I go to the merchant page there, and based on my preference, they can figure it out what is the perfect match for my food, and then I can start recommending that one. I found that very, very fascinating things to do that.
Oh yeah, I think personalization is key, right? And I think based on our past orders and all of that, I think this is key. While it definitely can be implemented through complex algorithms, I think with LLMs and generative AI, this becomes a lot more seamless and easy. Right, one use case that I recently encountered, right, is my son. So every time we order online, I'm based in India. For those you do not know, I use Swiggy a lot,
Mhm.
and my son basically says, "Hey, Daddy, what is available for me?" Right, and most of the time I ignore him. I want him to eat what the adults eat. So I think personalization in terms of understanding my persona, my family orders, and suggesting is a great productivity boost as an end user for me. It's saying, "Hey, your kid loves this, and this restaurant also has that." Right? Really, why don't you try out the menu for your kid? I think that makes it a lot more easier. We also use a lot of voice prompts today. I think generative AI powering voice assistants is also something that DoorDash is exploring. So definitely a great use case to start off with.
Right, right. Hopefully, our cost for food will be fulfilled with LLM sometime.
Yeah, yeah, and better restaurants. I think nothing takes that equation out of it, right? Great chefs, great restaurants, fulfilled with provider like DoorDash.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It will be very interesting to see how LLM kind of implemented across ecosystems, right from productivity, and they kind of talking about employee productivity as one of the options they're saying about, right. It will be very interesting to see how productivity softwares are adopting LLM and
Yeah,
how it's going to impact many other businesses in the meantime.
totally. I think if you brought out employee productivity, Anand, that's very great, very timely to me. They listed as point number 5 in the blog, but that to me is a great saver here, right? So a lot of data analysts involved, a lot of marketers involved in determining what campaigns, what restaurants, right? Companies like DoorDash, Swiggy, and all of them may
Mhm.
seem like they're solving the logistical problem of last mile delivery of food. No, that's not what they do. They also play a greater ecosystem play here, while by ensuring that the restaurants and the suppliers uh, have the data points to take action on what to sell, what not to sell,
Mhm.
manage their inventory, etc. Right. So I think they play a greater role here. So employees are assigned to all of these different campaigns and tasks. So definitely something that they're gonna leverage generative AI. One particular thing they've highlighted, and I think a lot of data teams are trying to do, is how to automate SQL writing, modeling, and generating code through that. Right. So I think that's a great use case. What are your thoughts on that, Anand? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that like surprisingly is pretty good. Like, I mean, I'm using it all the time. Like, I mean, or every day coding, I'm using it. It able to convert my protobuf files to YAML file very easily. And I can ask to write some code. It can give me the code. So it gives me a great boost to my productivity. And it's all about conceptualizing and better phrasing the question, so you will get a very good answer. But the only
Totally.
challenge is sometimes it may not be as good as possible, so you have to spend some time to kind of debug in certain cases. So, but other than that, I think this is really amazing. Huge productivity boost for me.
That's correct. And I think the one more use case that I liked, and I think I also tried, is through another service provider, not using ChatGPT, but then it's the same concept. Is parsing structured documents and putting questions on top of it. Pretty standard use case on all of the LLMs. So I think that's another great use case, right? So the extracting structured information.
Right. Yeah, LLM disruption on the last mile delivery of analytics, I believe that's going to be little like huge for the rightful reason. I believe that um, what LLM brings is the narrow gaps between the thought and the execution, right? If I'm thinking something, I'm able to express in my natural language and I'm able to get it very quickly, my answer, my coding and all those sort of things, right? So we might like we might get into a stage where a business user just blindly ask a question and there's nobody need to write in a SQL or anything. It just kind of background happening and give you the answer directly. That kind of reduce the friction in the last mile. It will create other problems. I mean, as with any human to machine interactions, or any human in the loop is always a wicked problem. It will create another problem,
Totally.
but it's a very healthy problem to have, I think.
Perfect. Any closing comments on this, Anand? Before we move to the next exciting topic.
Yeah, the next topic is another very interesting thing. It's about Europe data salary benchmark 2023. It's kind of very, very interesting finding. What do you think of? There's no big surprise. So, like we know pretty much like that's the rough ballpark on the European salary side of it. But what is the article is kind of given a very good idea about the role wise and the seniority wise, especially towards the data side of it. And it's also kind of a breakdown into countries and some of the top companies it is kind of paying. It's very like it's amazing like how close those cities are and how different the salary is. It's
Oh
very
yeah,
interesting.
totally. I think, like you said, it's pretty much common knowledge here for people in the industry around what salary ranges. So I think the distribution here, based on the career levels, I think that's pretty good. At senior levels, again, one specific call out is the analytics engineer, which is just a concept that's been in existence just for the last 2 years.
Mhm.
Right, so that's creating up speed and momentum. Uh, uh, and I think it's on par with the data engineer salary ranges in most parts. That's what I have also felt because they're able to understand business requirements and definitely a great career option for people who want to take that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that my experience in working in Europe for some time, my experience is that the base salary is one part, but European laws are not always very favorable to giving employees stock options and all that sort of things, right? So I think that is kind of very that's a debate on its own. I found it like when I went there and explored a few options there, and I found out like how hard it is to get a good stake in the company, like as part of your salary packages. Their
Yeah.
RSUs and options are like not that well established as what it used to be in the
Yeah.
United States.
Yeah, perfect. I think taxes are higher in Europe, definitely. So I think even the city-based distribution and skew that you see, I think gets averaged out a lot. For example, London salaries may seem higher, but then the taxation in London or in the UK is also higher for top earners than, for example, in Germany. But if people have a different opinion on that, do comment on our LinkedIn post when we post this podcast or share your feedback. We'll be happy to understand what the reality is on the ground.
Yeah. How do you see in India compared to this kind of a range, Ashwin? Like I know Bangalore is in a different league altogether.
Yeah,
Um,
Bangalore is largely similar, I would say. But then here's this interesting bit, right? For junior to mid-level ranges, the salaries are much lower
okay.
uh, as opposed to what you get in Europe. So anybody if I were to put it 5 to 10 year bracket is on a prime year. So those are the folks who basically get top salaries and a lot of beating the benchmark salaries, I would say. Some of these salaries at that level, including stock options, can meet what Europe is paying in Bangalore in particular.
Mhm.
Other cities, for example, can be considerably lower. Not to scare people from outsourcing their work to India. It's just that 5 to 10 year bracket of people who actually enter senior architect roles or lead data engineer roles are in demanding or in commanding positions right now because of the skill set availability. They're definitely, I would say, on par with Europe in terms of salary ranges.
Okay. Do you see any like in Europe, like each and every city has its own like even though we kind of say that for cities are largely a country, right? Like Berlin and Munich is kind of having a similar range, versus Amsterdam or London, Dublin has different way of handling things.
Yeah.
But India, the things like largely the similar the laws and similar taxation systems. Do you see any difference between companies like Bangalore? I hear a lot about Chennai as kind of a SaaS capital of India. So I'm curious, like, do you see any
Salary in
difference?
Chennai is definitely lower for sure. For
Okay.
example, Bangalore may pay you 30 to 40% more
Mhm.
because of the general perception there. It's like the California or the Bay Silicon Valley of the East here, right? So definitely the salary ranges are much higher in Bangalore. Pune and Chennai are other two markets along with Hyderabad that build the other portion, which are considerably lesser in terms of salary, but then the cost of living gets adjusted for that as well. So uh,
Mhm.
uh, it's definitely much lower, right? So I think we should do some more digging on this one and then come up with some more data points around exactly what similar to how this blog is around from Mike. Right. So we'll definitely do something for India.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking of like maybe it's worthwhile to kind of circulate a survey in data engineering weekly to understand about Indian market a little more. Uh,
Totally.
yeah, yeah. The next article is about implementing data validation with great expectations in hybrid environment. This blog from Vega is talking about their experience implementing great expectation, their data validation tool, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, what's your take on that, Ashwin?
No, I think there's not a week that goes by without us talking around data quality, contracts, and sometimes data mission products. So this week we don't have mission products, but good expectations is like your validation for data quality, right? So I think a lot of customers are adopting the open source version of data expectations. There are other vendors and other players. What I've seen is end of spectrum, like companies which are more enterprise heavy. Have used out of the box data quality tools like Informatica, Talent. You've got SAS, IBM, all of these vendors providing complex data quality validation. But then those work if you have uh, their ETL offerings as well. But then if you're using code and if you want to integrate your quality as code kind of construct, then their expectations and other validation routines like sort of example also come into picture, right?
Right.
So validation and as well as both of these players are also entering the contracts perspective as well. So definitely something that we need to do. I think it's about ensuring that people are able to understand their gaps in data, and I think as much as the expectation can move left and as early as possible, I see a lot and a clear benefit in terms of how people can do some simple data quality checks. Right? So you don't do it after the action, do it while the action is happening. I think that's been my principle and philosophy in defining data architectures. I think expectations fits to some extent.
This is also a good time for me to kind of have some seamless promotion of Schemata. We just recently added data validation protocol support in Schemata standards, where you can define your data quality rule in protobuf, and you can write your own plugin to convert that into any of your favorite rules. Like, for example, you can write a great expectation rule, you can write your own, any other tools that you want to bring in that you can actually establish out of it. Like, so with Schemata, you can actually build a full schema modeling framework on top of an IDL, which is very cool to do that.
Totally, everybody should try that. I think on a separate topic, we should do a 1 hour of schemata overview for people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, happy to do that. It's a good idea.
Perfect.
The last one we have is how Expedia reviews engineering is using event stream as the source of truth. event stream as a source of truth. That's an amazing topic to discuss.
Yeah, totally. I think that's also like mesh and products for us because almost every other week we are talking about event states and event-based architectures, which begs me to the question: are we getting into a space where we are seeing a lot of customers move to event stream-based architecture and completely replacing their legacy stack on it?
Um, it depends. Like, I mean, my advice is always like, uh, you know, when you really need an event-based architecture, essentially, when your application started to become pretty big, like big in the sense like you have more and more integration, you wanted to give in more and more modularity, and then you want to compose those different component. Um, you have to take a best call. I have seen I have seen applications scale with a monolithic also, and
Mm-hmm.
I have seen applications with the microservices also. In the last 6 years, I have seen both the world, and there is no right and wrong. It is all about engineering maturity. For example, I think even in this article, it's talking about the consistency, idempotency, and then scaling, right? Um, so when you are adopting event-based system, you will be going with an eventual consistent model, right?
Mm.
But like, and then like you will, so you have to design your system that kind of tolerate that kind of a model.
Yeah.
When you are doing it everything in one database and all the transactions happening, like you just have one MySQL system, a very strong, consistent guarantee that you will have it. There's a huge luxury of having it. Like application code will be much more simpler.
Seamless. Yeah.
And you can just offload a lot of all those guarantees in to the databases. So that is a pros and cons. Like you when you are doing this decision, you essentially need to identify what are you going to give up, and are we at the engineering maturity to kind of do that one. It's a very
Perfect. L-
yeah.
Let me ask you a question, Anand. So, when should people not look at event streams as an architecture, right?
When they should not record, right? It's a very good question. So when they should not do that, I'm just kind of think through some example scenario where we can do that. For example, if you are doing an e-commerce, right? So okay, here's my perspective on this whole thing, right? Any application to work, you need to have three different type of data storage. You need to have an operational system. You need to have an operational storage. You need to have your own search indexing and all sort of things. So you need to have some kind of a free text search, so search infrastructure, and then you need to have some analytical databases in your side. So when you are trying to adopt the event-based modeling, the very first step that you should try to adopt event-based modeling to connect these three databases first. And then, so let's say I'm doing some modification, like I'm just adding a new shopping cart and I'm making a change in MySQL. I wanted to make sure that I want to search whatever the things that I'm adding. You will be very well adopt this whole event streaming architecture. So whenever you are adopting an event streaming architecture, you're essentially materializing into another way. Right? You like events carry what is happening in the current state. So you have, in order for you to serve to the user, you have to reproduce a state in some other databases. Like it could be a search engine, it could be an analytical database, it could be a data warehouse. So as long as the event that you are sending is going to be materialized in a different data structure, the event streaming is a very good option for you to start with adopting those things. And as the application kind of scale and your engineering org will be kind of scaling, and then you might want to have a scenario where, okay, I have my own MySQL system. I wanted to kind of, for some cases, I may want to use DynamoDB or some other system kind of very self-contained and should be fine. And I want to exchange the data information there, right? So if you're organically evolving your architecture, that's a way to go. Look for the storage option. Look, is there any materialization that I need to do, which is different from my operational store, and then adopt event streaming architecture. In some companies, or many large companies, this is not this is not an option. In many cases, I have seen companies, like many of the companies will kind of suddenly acquire a new company, and they're bringing their own infrastructure or their own component, then you will leave with no other option. You have to exchange information across those different systems to materialize and sort of things, right? So always look for the pattern.
Yeah,
If you are sending an event, are you materializing in a different data structure, which is a search engine, could be an analytical or a data warehouse? Then event streaming is a very good chance for you to start working.
perfect. I think going back to the blog, Anand, and thank you for sharing this in greater detail. I think this should be a blog from you also around why you should and why you should not, and when you should not. The
Yeah.
other point I think you also mentioned at the start is around engineering maturity. I think team maturity around handling this is also important, right? The skill sets are a little bit different. We are working just on MySQL and databases. The team maturity is a little bit more different.
Yeah.
Moving back to the blog again, I think the team here have done a pretty good coverage around how they use Kafka, and some of these are common topics and discussion. So we allow you to read through the blog around how they've done it. But one thing that stood out for me is the migration strategy architecture that they put up around how they did uh, migrate from existing to the current state where it's completely backfilled for complete synchronization of data between the database as well as the Kafka clusters as well. Any thoughts on that, Anand?
I really like the way they kind of do the backfilling
Yeah.
on top of Kafka, and then it's kind of full-fledged implementation of the full-fledged implementation of Kafka architecture. It seems they kind of streaming back and backfill job also coming to Kafka, read the events and all those things. It's just kind of very interesting to see. I'm kind of more of a database, sorry, data warehouse native designer. So
Hmm.
I would kind of do this backfill in terms of the data warehouse. This is something I'm also was kind of, sometimes I had this conversation with Apache Rudy folks, with, like, why can't Rudy can give you the Kafka protocol support, so you can stream the event to Rudy, and you can also stream the event to Kafka, and the backfilling jobs, like what the Travaga kind of, so what Expedia is kind of talking about here, backfilling job, streaming data back to Kafka. It's just pretty expensive to do that, right? It's not that very cheap to suddenly you just send all those backfilling events into Kafka, then you have to plan for your Kafka storage and all sort of a thing. This is something kind of very interesting to explore, like when Lakehouse architectures can extend it to be, Kafka native architecture, so that all those backfilling doesn't needs to go via Kafka, but applications still use the same protocol to access both the systems.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
I like the blog. It's
yeah,
pretty detailed. I think they've covered some basics of how they manage the system, etc. So I think pretty good and detailed coverage uh,
yeah. So
around how they manage.
especially they kind of giving the guidelines about storing events in Kafka. So
Yes,
kind of adopting like fair entity, storing in partition per entity, right? Like every partition will have single partition, single entity should be assigned to a single partition. So every entity goes to one specific partition. So if you wanted to kind of target to consume that particular entity, that goes to that particular partition, and you can do that one. Um, there is also, so they kind of avoid the inconsistent state, because all the entity update will go to one particular partition, and Kafka by definition, within a partition, it support ordering guarantees for
correct.
the partition, right? So
Yeah,
they adopting that. Only challenge I see with this kind of an approach is like, when you wanted to consume only a particular topic, and then you cannot apply any push down filter of in Kafka, right? You have to
yes,
consume everything, and the application side you have to filter it.
yeah,
So when you are doing this per partition state, you will be applying any kind of a hash partitions or any other things. So there's a, it's most likely, or like 99%, like you will have in one partition, you might have 10 different entity type goes through this one. So if I am a consumer, I want to consume only that particular entity, I still need to consume everything in the partition, and then I have to filter it out.
yeah.
So that is a bigger burden for me in that particular cases, right? So um, yeah, there's a pros and cons on both approaches essentially.
Yeah, I think with the number of articles that I'm reading and different organizations that are adopting event
Mhm.
streams, I'm more excited in terms of what the next generation of architecture is going to be, right? So I also come from a warehouse native architecture, largely with a bit of event streaming, but I think uh, events can become the primary source of truth, right?
Mhm.
So that's a reality. I think if the engineering maturity allows for organization and if the scale allows, then definitely people should look at event streaming. And then there are a lot of things that go towards left hand side on how you load the events and etc. That I think we covered in an earlier podcast around how people have used the BCM and other CDC technologies to do that, right? So, uh, great topic, and
So,
kind of come to the conclusion of today's episode, right, covering different and varied spectrums of data, talking about uh, data salaries in Europe in particular, talking about generative AI application as part of DoorDash, and probably a lot more interesting use cases that are yet to come out in the data space. And if you're working on that particular use case, drop us a note. If you're writing something, send your blogs and information to Anand. We'll be excited to learn and share it with the broader world as well. Uh, Real-time architectures again, combined with great expectations around putting the validations on data. I think great way to close to ensure that data is all clean, trusted, and available at a latency that people want. Right? So
excellent. Great. Excellent episode, Ashwin. We'll see next week. Thank you all.
thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.